Good afternoon and welcome to another in our series of program. Talk Sports is the Saturday Sports Special, and it's our first program for the year 2021. And welcome to all our viewers wherever you are in Grenada, the Caribbean, the rest of the world. Thank you for tuning in to our Saturday Sports Special. I'm your host, Michael Bascom. And, interesting enough that we had quite a number of guests on the year, in the year 2020. And no doubt we're looking forward to to 2021. And indeed, I can tell you that we have quite a number of interesting guests to be on the program. They lined up on the program for this year. This Saturday is no different than others, and I will introduce my guest in a short while. But I want to wish all our folks, all our viewers, and our fans around the world a happy new year. And thanks for making the Talk Sports Saturday Sports Special what it really is. And I look forward to you being with us and enjoying the discussions over the next few months. Well, for what is remaining of 2021. Well, it was an interesting year in 2020. No doubt sports have been affected to some extent, a great deal. We realized the Olympic Games for one, and whether it was football, cricket, just name it, sports had a very adverse effect. It had an adverse effect on sports to an extent, although there are some local in terms of Grenada and other islands have had, periodic, sporting events, not to the large scale though, because of the protocols involved. And we look forward this year to the Olympic Games and to other international, but track and field hopefully will return, and other international sporting events. So wherever you are, welcome once again. And today I want to introduce our guest on the program. He's a first timer to the program, the former principal of the St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School, SAASS. It's a tradition. It is also, I can say, all right, we will get more from that, but I want to introduce to you Mr. Creswell Julien Jr., also known as Francis Julien. Obviously, Creswell Julien, when you hear the name Creswell Julien, you're thinking of the late Creswell Julien. Well, he's the son of the late Creswell Julien. And as I said, it's a tradition. The father was once a principal. And, having Mr. Creswell Julien Jr. on the program is very special because St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School, SAASS, has been a powerhouse in sports in Grenada, not just track and field, football, cricket, sports in particular. St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School, and by the way, both boys and girls. For some reason, we have always forgotten the girls, and always thinking about the boys. But, the girls have had their share as well. And Mr. Julien will give us historical context of SAASS and its accomplishments over the years. When I was researching about SAASS, the name Francis Julien came up. Well, Mr. Julien, for some reason, I never known him as Francis Julien. I always known him as Mr. Julien. I had that level of respect simply because he seems to be the one that very disciplined, and he, I guess it came from his father, the disciplinarian. And no doubt he has had that level of respect from past students of the St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School. When you speak to them about Mr. Julien, they will tell you that. Let me no doubt welcome Mr. Julien to the program and welcome him. Well, in fact, wherever he is, I can tell you he is in England, so it is evening time. And I welcome Mr. Julien. Good evening to you, Mr. Julien.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thanks for having me on your program. I'm honored to be on this special sports program today. I want to say special welcome to my former students and past students, even the present ones who may know me at the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary Schools, and also teachers of the SAASS, St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School. Welcome to this program today. I hope the year goes well for every one of us. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. And I want to welcome you as well, and to all the past students of the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School, the alumni, both male and female. Let me start off, Mr. Julien, by asking you how I know England now is basically in a state of lockdown to some extent. How have you been coping with the whole pandemic?
I've been managing quite well, I should say. I was on vacation in Grenada up to March the 8th. And from the time I returned, we have been in various stages of lockdown, as you call it. But for someone like me, I've been able to do my usual walking. When I come to Grenada, people see me walking most mornings, walking from Salisbury Road to Wells Airport and back most mornings. And I've been doing probably a similar loop here in the UK, where I now reside. So I've been managing that quite well, I hope, I believe, I think. Thank you.
Well, glad to know you have been managing well, and glad to know also that you and family coping. Let's get into a little bit of the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School, SAASS, and as you know, for the next hour and bit, because it's a 2-hour segment, we're trying to cover as much as possible with you regarding the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School. Historically, when did St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School actually began operations in Grenada?
From my knowledge, it would be 1944. So we were the first co-ed secondary school in Grenada. So we followed GBSS, Anglican High School, and the St. Joseph Convent St. George's. So we were number 4, the 4th school to be established in Grenada as a secondary school, even education to boys and girls in the parish of St. Andrews and beyond. From my recollection, I know that we have had students from St. Patrick's, Grove, that's St. John's, St. Mark's, and St. David's, probably St. George's at times. I know we had 1 or 2 from St. George's in the 70s, such as one of the Haywood brothers, the younger one. He attended SAASS for a few years and then went back to St. George's. So we have had people from basically all over the island attending SAASS. One of the persons I remember, I in fact got to know about in the last few years, who came from SAASS, is Calkins Monroe. I happened to have met him at the airport in St. George's about 4 years ago. He introduced himself to me. I knew him before, but I never knew that he attended SAASS. So we had a chat, and he told me that he attended SAASS, gave me the years. I researched it, and it was, in fact, true that he attended from the late 50s into the early 60s, so up to 1963. So he spent a number of years at SAASS, getting his secondary education at that institution. One other one from SAASS, at least one of the other, there are quite a few, that I do remember. Me have seen him play football for SAASS, was a young man at the time called Dory. I think he was a Springer, but everybody knew him as Dory from SAASS. He passed away a few years ago too. And then Anthony Gordon from SAASS. These were a few of the people who came from SAASS directly into SAASS. But there were a number of others from like Hermitage and so on, who came to school in SAASS, like brothers of former Prime Minister Tillman Thomas and the likes attended SAASS.
So, quite an entourage, I should say, of distinguished. And no doubt, you call names, but SAASS in itself has distinguished itself as top contender in sports in Grenada. And as I said, not just track and field. I know Intercall was its its heyday for the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School, but you can point at football and cricket and volleyball. Just name the sports that SAASS will compete in, and it will be competitive to its core. And you yourself, Mr. Julien, has been in the center of all of that, especially at the time when SAASS, around the 80s, 90s, when, SAASS was, top dogs, I should say. It was always a SAASS GBSS encounter to some extent. The rivalry was great. Even during my time at the GBSS, the only other real rivalry I can recall is that of the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School, SAASS. So it's not just, within the last 5 years or so, even as you said, back in the 60s and 70s, SAASS was there, competing. Let's talk a bit of the history of the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School, especially in sports.
If I can go back to Mr. Monroe, when I met him at the airport, he related two stories for me. One had to do with him playing football for the school, and SAASS played a game against GBSS. We lost that game 1-0, and he was missing from the team at the time. But in return game, he said that Mr. Julien Sr. insisted that he play. He played, and they won the game 1-0. So the results are reversed. So they won that game. But the other story he gave me, which was probably more significant, was the fact that in a quiz among the secondary schools, himself and one Maria Blaze, who went on to become Grenada Council at Brussels, I believe, they represented SAASS at the quiz, and they won the competition, beating off the other secondary schools that participated. So whether it was 1970, 60, or 61, or whichever year, it was the two of them who represented SAASS, and they won the competition. And he told me, in fact, from that time on, SAASS started looking upwards. They started advancing. People started recognizing SAASS. So that would have been between 1959 and 1962-63. That is what he told me. Maria Blaze has since passed on, but he's still around. To go further on, if we go to the 1960s now, when SAASS started doing quite well in the call, both in the boys and the girls, I recollect that Creswell Julien Sr. has related that story more than once, where SAASS boys would have won the games, but for some reason or the other, they didn't because even though Intercolors on one day in those days, there was a year, for example, when the games some events were held on a Saturday because it got too dark on the Thursday to finish the games on the Thursday, so they held over some events on the Saturday. And SAASS lost, in 1 year SAASS boys lost, simply because a couple of the participants on the SAASS team were Adventists, and they did not turn up on the Saturday to participate in the games at Queen's Park. And so they would have been probably winners in the events, but they were not present for the events. And so SAASS did not have a strong contingent for the events, particular events that day. And so they lost the event, the meet Intercall that year, particular year. And I know we have had instances in the recent past where also
Well,
we have
just
had
before you go into that, a little clarity. So you're saying that because some of the participants from SAASS were Seventh-day Adventists, and because some of the events were held on the Saturday, that they could not have participated, and thus SAASS would have lost points
yeah,
and lost the championship.
that's a fact. Yeah, they were probably winners, and would have been probably been winners in the events. About 2 or 3 boys, Mr. Julien had said, Creswell Julien Sr. had said. So he has told that story more than once that intercall preparation and so on for teams in later years. And we have had to go to St. George's and in the 80s, I remember too, to intercall on 2 consecutive Saturdays to finish a game in 2 separate years, that is. So it is not the first time or the second time. It has happened more than once. And I say this to say that I go back to a time not too far back, 2017, to an article written by Ali Gill stating that, where he says that in the culture will probably move to the weekend. This is going to discriminate against Adventists. So, for example, among those who not participate on a Saturday, now the Adventists from other secondary schools, most of them would choose not to go. So to have an intercall on a Friday evening or on a Saturday are big no-nos, if you want to get where I'm coming from. So it would be discriminating against Adventists and other religions for that matter, if you had intercall on a Friday evening or on a Saturday, as the case might be. So that is impractical, really. He wrote that actually on the 1st of July, I think, 2017, as Ali Gill, a lawyer. So I'm actually quoting him from his article on that.
Okay, well, some interesting stuff indeed, and I guess as much it's strengthened the point we have been making over the past few weeks that the history of sports in Grenada in various segments, including the intercall, has to be documented, and we get in bits and pieces, and those will be segments, obviously, that can be documented and included in the history of sports and the history of intercall, because as I said, for some reason we only knew of the GBSS, the PVC, the SAASS, and probably the McDonald College. But when you speak to various people, even the St. David's Catholic Secondary School, before their charade in terms of the girls' championship, they had some outstanding athletes who would have been around, but because everything would have been the GBSS, the PBC, the SAASS, etc., and even to the girls, the St. Joseph Convent and the Anglican High School, they would have been overshadowed. But interesting stuff. What else you think Creswell Julien Sr., not what else, but what might have told you that you think is interesting enough to share with our viewers, because it appears that the late Creswell Julien Sr. has had a wealth of knowledge regarding not just education, but sports as well.
Well, what we do know from him is that, as I said, you were told stories that intercall to the teams when they were training, or when we had team meetings and so on. And some of these things would come up, but no one actually documented those factual information at all. They're not being documented because if you look back to the starting date for intercall, as regards to what we know about, starting from 1965, I could tell you that, and from my knowledge, that intercall started before 1965. Because the same Creswell Julien said that there were years, in fact, before that, when SAASS went into call and did not make any points at times. So it has to be before 1965. Intercall did not start in 65. It started long before that. SAASS went in the call. If you were to speak to Mrs. Noel, Sonny Noel, she would tell you that her older brother, I don't remember his first name now, he participated in the call. So that would be before 1965. I think it's Eugene Sonny would be his name. He would have been at the call before 1965. And the others who could tell you the same story. So 1965 is not the actual starting date. It goes way before that. SAASS would have gone to the call and not made a point at the call in some of those early years. Just to make that clear there.
So therefore, it's probably they may have just started documented results and other official, official results, I should say, probably in the 70s. But as far as you understood that intercall would have started way back, probably in the 60s.
And I know my father took us as children every year to intercall. But my first real recollection would have been from 1968, the year that the girls won for the first time. But I know that we went, I was born in 57, and he was here in England studying in 63 and 64, early 64 probably. So he would have missed 1 year at least of intercall, or when SAASS would have gone to intercall or not. So it is not, what I would say probably about the record keeping is that they may have been lost probably in the years preceding 1965. And so what they have documents from 1965 onwards. But probably information before that period may have been lost. Not that they were not documented, just probably lost. I know the GBSS, probably the headmaster's office was burned at one time, so some of these records would have been probably kept there and would have been lost. And so for example, the chairmanship of the Principals Association went around, shared between the principals of SAASS, GBSS, PBC, and the St. Joseph Convent, St. George's in the early years. And later on, we may have gone to the convent in Grenada where you had Sister Bernard Tankai, and who actually went to St. Vincent sometime in the late 60s and returned to Grenada in the 70s or 80s. So these 5 people, or 5 schools at the time, would have shared the presidency of the association and as heads of the Principals Association, they said. So these are 2 different bodies, the association body and the Principal Games Association body, which constitutes the secondary schools at the time, early from GBSS to high school, to convent in St. George's, then SAASS, then PBC, and the convent in Grenada, and later on St. John Christian Secondary, and then St. Rose Modern Secondary and MacDonald College. They came later. PBC came after SAASS, and then the convent in Grenada started after the PBC boys in St. George's. So these were the 5 or 6 early schools up to that time. As I said, MacDonald College and St. Rose and St. John's Christian would have been started after that, and then St. David's at a later date.
Well, I'm repeating, and Mr. Julien, you may have to be part of this whole, research team in terms of putting information together regarding, sports, and particularly we want to zoom in on the intercall, because every time we speak about intercall, we get in bits and pieces of information, and there's nothing really documented. You'll hear this, you'll hear that, and then there will be those who will add this and other things, bits and pieces, because as you said, you would have gotten information from your late dad, and there are others who would have gotten information from other relatives and friends, and there needs to be some sort of documentation where an entire generation will go without knowing the true history of intercall. And for some of them, intercall would have started yesterday. You know, we need to know about the intercall championships and the exploit of some of the athletes who would have, you know, blazed the tracks even then. You know, I'm assuming that the Simon area, or you know, wherever in St. Andrews, would have been the hallmark of many outstanding students, boys and girls in particular, who would have represented Grenada back in the 60s and the 70s. And as we know, St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School, for one, dominated the field events for many years. It was one of the segment of track and field that SAASS will always dominate and win points, you know. And it was always fearing among other schools that if they do not try to deplete the strength of SAASS in the field events, there's no way they can defeat them. But interesting enough that you made the point of the years, and I am seeing there that in 1969 there was no boys champion documented according to the official intercall stats. And there are a couple of years where there were no boys or girls. For example, in 1970, there was a boys champion, no girls champion. Then there was no championship, I think, in 73, 74, you know, a couple of years. You know, in an earlier conversation with you, you were telling me about some of those years where there were particular problems. But let's look at in the early years of what was documented. 1965 is there. There is nothing documented for 1966. Okay, but 68 we have the girls, SAASS winning the girls, and in 69 Anglican High School winning the girls, but no boys champion. What you know about that, or is that just an error?
There were no boys championships in that year, and the reason is it's a very strange one. It's only about 5 years ago. It actually struck me that it did not make any sense. It did not make any sense that there should be no boys games, and in the alternate years when there are no girls events, that there shouldn't be no girls intercall. So it was a rather strange one that there should not have been. There was no competition, as you stated, as indicated. Not that there were. Let me look at, if I look at my thing for 68, there was boys and girls. SAASS won the girls, and GBSS won the boys. But in 1969, there was a girls champion, Anglican High School won, but there was no boys championships. The boys simply did not compete that year. There were no boys championships. No one can say anything different to that. Just that the boys were not allowed, and no boys school competed that year. So there was no championship for the boys. Details of those years, I can probably give you in a private conversation afterwards. It goes too deep. It will go too deep to discuss it now.
You mean too deep and too controversial? Are you saying too deep and too controversial?
It will be very controversial. It will be very controversial, a topic right now for this medium. It would, to say the least, it would, as I said, it really dawned on me about 5 years ago, even less, that should have happened at all. So they put many people to shame. If I were to mention exactly what was the cause, not many people now would realize what the cause was. One simple cause it was. And it would be even now very disturbing. That was, in one year there's no boys championships, in another year there'll be no girls championships. For example, I can give probably an example that in 70, when there was no boys championships, 69, sorry, when there was no boys championships, SAASS had two very outstanding male athletes. Fitzgerald Davis, who dominated in 1970, and one guy called Maxi Nayak, Douglas Maxi Nayak. There were two very stalwart athletes at SAASS. And I can give you the story of one event in that year, 69, when they ran against each other in the 200 meters. The race started, and Maxi ran up on Judd Davis, and they ran stride for stride to the finish line. And Davis won the event by stretching out his hand and grabbing at the wool that marked the finish line. That's how he won the event. They would not have been able to separate them afterwards, either or any other way. He grabbed the tape, and so he won the event. And the same happened in 1970.
And you said the tape, well, the wool, because at that time they used to use that. Yeah, right.
Not as today, no electronic as today.
Right, yeah.
In 1970, Fitz had the same issue in St. George, a similar issue. He ran against a clean guy, the 100 meters. It was clear that he won, but Mr. Clean stayed at the finish line arguing with the judges there that he had won. Fitzgerald Davis ran very upright. He ran very straight and upright. He actually beat him fair and square, but Glenn decided he must argue with the judges. And if you remember, Mr. Decoto, I think he was known as Dandarat. He was one of the persons he was arguing with profusely for about 5 minutes. Today we not tolerate that at all, but they just tolerated him, but he was there arguing with the judges for over 5 minutes. He wouldn't concede that he lost. He's like our current president in the United States, your current president. Similar attitude. Not conceding at all.
So you know, and I'm reading some of the comments that coming in there, you know, that you know, and it's I think as someone who has that recollection of all these things, and probably to some extent you may have started documenting some of these things, you know, you need to put a little more emphasis. Probably this year may be the year that you probably can do that. Put a little more emphasis in documenting a little more details, especially some of these events that you think would have shaped, and you know, whether scripted or unscripted, you know, but they would have shaped what would have transpired then and in the future. Because as you start calling names like Mr. Ward, Dandarat, the late Dandarat, and you know, Mr. Kotu and others, and these were officials who volunteered their time, and you know, and no doubt, I'm surprised that you were able to remember all these things. Seems as if you were sharp in terms of you know, remembering these things. You know,
I mean, I recall watching that event from the pavilion. I mean, I would have been probably Form 2 at the time. So I watched the event from the pavilion. There was no doubt at all in that particular event. And so it was quite sad at the time to see how the athlete behaved. It would not have been tolerated probably a few years later on. And even now, they didn't tolerate him, but he did put up a fight. As such, it was a fight. He was the one making his point that he felt he had won the event. It was clear cut. Probably one of the more clear cut wins I've seen for a long time. Where two athletes thought they were close enough to have for the other to believe that he won the event. I suppose at another time, with probably less, what should I term it, less officials of lower standards, I suppose, he may have been given a victory. But these men are upstanding men, even though they were from St. George, they were upstanding men in the community, and they would not bend to such arguments, I believe, I suppose. I don't think they did. I knew them from since that time onwards until, I suppose, they passed, and I never got that from them. Even if they worked with different schools, they were very upright men to my knowledge. Yeah. So I would applaud them for that, at least.
Some names start flowing in, and obviously we'll have to talk about some of them. Thanks, Adrian Francis, for that. The names like Trevor Modeste and Eros Rapier and others, and definitely, as we said, that the St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School, and by the way, some of these folks would have appeared on the program before, like Trevor Modeste and Eugene Licorice and others, and I saw the name Bai came up there as well, because I think a lot of folks are reconnecting with you by the name Bai, I would ask you to give me, tell me how you came by the name Bai, because I know everyone has a nickname, but going into the names that have been called in terms of the Modeste, and the Modeste, by the way, is a very talented clan, and would have contributed a lot in terms of sports to the St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School, SAASS in particular, and the parish of St. Andrew, because whether it was SAASS or the Grenada Secondary School, they were outstanding in whichever way, whether it's sprinting, whether in the field events, but we have the Trevor Modeste and Mike Modeste and, the others, and the Eugene Licorice and others as well. Going back to those glory days for SAASS, what do you think that meant, not just to St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School, but the parish, the big parish?
But before I actually go into that, I want to mention one of the Modestes, and she's Judy Modeste, a character silver medalist in the junior javelin. We lost her about 2 or 3 years ago, so she's passed. She died about 2 or 3 years ago. So she's one of the Modeste clan, as you say, but she has passed on. So I want to recognize her here and remember her at this juncture. So she'll be probably a niece of Trevor Modeste, I believe, yeah. So to go into SAASS in the years when and how SAASS was, how it contributed to life in St. Andrews. In fact, when SAASS won, it was a win for not only SAASS, but for St. Andrews and for the country, as people termed it. I remember we had a teacher from SAASS in the 90s, thereabouts. And he thought that St. Patrick's was a country. He thought that SAASS was in the town, part of the town, until we told him that SAASS is a country too. And in fact, some people say that from once you hit Bolio Bridge there, on the way up, that is country. I don't know where that comes from, but that is what some people have come to believe, that the country starts from Bolio Bridge all the way up. And he believed that the country was from SAASS, or SAASS was a country, everywhere else was a town. But he was from St. Patrick's, a teacher at SAASS. That would have been in the late 80s, early 90s, thereabouts. So SAASS represented the countryside, as people recognize it as. So whenever we won anything, the whole parish of St. Andrews and neighboring areas celebrated it too. As you will see with the convent a couple of years ago, St. Joseph Convent St. Andrews, when they won the girls' championships for the first time, they were recognized in the parish as representing not just convent, but representing the parish. So it goes that way. I mean, there's a thing about tongue and country which we don't recognize, which we would not want to recognize, but which many people still hang on to. That would have been for the 70s and 80s. but not in the 2000s, but some people still hang on to that. And some of these are country folks who believe that they are from St. George's because I went to school in St. George's. That is beyond the pale, really, if you look at it that way. But as I said before, we have had athletes from all over the island. We had from in the 60s, we had Eric Butler from St. John's and John English. They were very good footballers and athletes in their own rights, both represented SAASS. And there were others who came from that parish. And a number from St. David's also, who came up to SAASS before there was a St. David, that was before the St. David's Catholic School came into being. A number of those people came from SAASS. We had a Blaisdell guy who I met at SAASS. He was about 2 years ahead of me at SAASS. I entered SAASS in 1968. He was already in Form 3 when I got to SAASS. And he's from St. David's. And others, we had much later, we had other Blaisdell, like Katisha Blaisdell, who may be related to him and so on. And the likes. So when they when they didn't go to St. George's schools, they came to SAASS. And so it went.
Do you think, Mr. Julien, that the stigma then that, okay, St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School, SAASS, and as you said, it's a country school. Do you think that helped in motivating and inspiring your athletes during that time, that they put that behind, shoved that behind them, and just use that sort of stigma as country boys, country girls to excel, especially in sports?
I don't know if I can put it that way, as you're saying, as you put it, but what I believe is that we felt we had or at least felt that I had a duty to do it for the parish. Much later, the St. Andrews became known as a big parish. I don't know where that started. I suppose the biggest parish, but it did not start in 1970 or 75 or thereabouts, but it probably came about later. But when we participated, as I said, we did it for the parish, or for what people call the country area, the country. So we represented the whole of the countryside, as it was termed at the time, and probably still is termed. We represented the country, and so it was more that than just SAASS. Or at least would have put out the best efforts for competing in any other sports for that matter. Because if I were to just deviate to cricket for a while, you may have heard probably about a guy called Paper Doll in cricket. He played for Grenada many years ago. So that would be in the early 60s, probably late 50s, early 60s. But he played for Grenada. There was another guy called Enoch Andrews also. And they would have played for Grenada or some of the sort, and quite a few others, but they were country boys, I thought. In fact, I have two uncles who would have played football in the 1960s, early 60s when they went to SAASS, played for St. Andrews, played for SAASS itself. One was very good enough. One was a goalkeeper. His name was Sidney Alexander. I've sent you a picture there some time ago. And the one in the picture at the back is his brother called, we know him as, his name is Vaughn, but we know him as Vaughn. Everybody knew him as Vaughn. He's a very tall guy. And he was a defender. But his brother was a goalkeeper. His brother Sidney was a goalkeeper. Better known as S.A. There was another S.A. called Steve Alexander. I think he was a consul general in the United States for a long time, until his passing about more than 5 years ago, thereabouts. So Both of these brothers, my uncles who are in the 70s now, were very good footballers. They would have been in SAASS in the 50s into the 60s. And as I said, SA would have been a very good goalkeeper on par with Paul Roberts. But Paul, being from St. George's, would have got a nod ahead of him to say for the national team. He was just as good, probably in some people's eyes, or better than Paul at the time. But Paul was a national goalkeeper in those years in the 60s, early 70s. But SA would have been just as good as him. SA migrated to the States in probably before 1970, so you would have left the scene before 1970. But I knew him then, playing for St. Andrews, playing for SAASS. So I seen him as a little boy when he played for SAASS and then for his club team, and then being a St. Andrews goalkeeper in the National League, as it was at the time, First Division championships. So the town and country thing came about. It was very difficult. I didn't have a country boy to get into the team. All I have a few first cousins who made the national team. But I want to believe it's because they went to school at St. George's. You may have heard of Dr. Noel. The two brothers were two medical doctors, and the cousin and the brother Dennis. All
Dennis,
played for Grenada. Dennis has since passed away about 2 years ago, or last year, I believe, only last year. So Dennis was a younger brother, and the two others were medical doctors. But all three brothers played for Grenada. But they all went to school in St. George's. And they went to school in SAASS, which was a secondary school at the time out of St. George's. They may not have made the team. And their uncles were probably just as good as they did not get onto the team at all. I don't know if anyone can point to a year when SA made the national team as a goalkeeper. But he was a very, very good goalkeeper in the 60s. Probably second to Paul or equal to Paul Roberts. I guess you would know Paul Roberts or know of him.
Yeah. Paul was also on the program some time ago as well. It's quite interesting that and I want to put on my head and read some of the comments that were flowing in. Well, we heard from Eugene Licorice, as you know, we mentioned his name earlier, and Adrian Francis actually saying the finish line was another story. You won the race, but another athlete would run past, taking the wool with him, and he declared the winner. I think it's something to what you referred to there, and he was declared the winner, so even though you come in first and somebody just whisk ahead and grab the wool, as they say, and there is also, but I wonder if this is quoting from to bring to our parish the noblest and the best. We hail you, dear St. Andrew, we shall not fail life's test, unquote. Taken from the school song. Okay, right. SAASS represented not just the school or church, but the entire parish. It was, and it's a big deal to excel in all things. So I assume that's why it's called the big parish. Thank you, Donna, for that comment there. Right, and there were some other comments coming in. And as Toro was saying earlier, it's historical, very historical information, and nice historical recollection was his exact words used. But then your good friend Patrick is telling me to ask you to reveal the documentation to the public. He has it well documented. So here is a request that you reveal the documentation to the public. You need to share it, and it's coming from your good pal, Mr. Simmons.
Exactly
what say you?
Exactly what is he talking about? Yes, I tell you what he's talking about exactly.
I assume it has to do with SAASS and Intercall and things about sports in particular. There must be something that Triggs knows that you probably know as well, Good afternoon to you, Porgy Cherubin, as he says, respect to Mr. Julien. But, you know, interesting enough.
Interestingly, I
sorry?
met friends with Porgy about in the late 1990s. We met for the first time face-to-face in the 1990s. I knew of him before, but we
That's Porgy, right?
Yeah, Porgy, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We met in the late 90s thereabouts, or mid-90s, let us say. And we became not very close, but we made great acquaintances at that time, because we worked together in the GACA as it was at the time, GAA as it is presently. So we would have shared information between us in those years, or whenever we met at meetings and so on. So I should say we don't go back a very, very long way, but we do go back a few years. But interestingly, I have a cousin in St. George's and St. Paul's, where my father is from, and it is shameful that I should have to say that here and now, that I only got to know that he was, or is my cousin, in fact, probably not more than 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, or probably a little more. I used to hear my father talking about one Will Papa, but he never told us who Will Papa was as children. But Will Papa is the father of George Courtney Robinson, and my father and Will Papa are cousins. So therefore, myself and George Robinson are cousins, very close cousins. And I only got to know that, as I said, about 15 years ago. And I recall that in 1 year, Courtney, as he's known by everyone, really, came up to St. Andrews to help with the team in 1980, before the year we were going to win Intercol, because he saw that we lost Intercol 1979 by a few points, and which should not have happened. So he came up to help us that year. And it was really probably just put the final icing on the cake that he did that. And even at that time, I did not know we were cousins. And I said it's a bit shameful at that time, not to know that at that time.
I was about to ask you whether it was because Goatee has had this affection for the big parish, and I know he spoke. Well, Eugene was on the program before, and Eugene spoke about Goatee being in assisting SAASS and being there. Goatee himself spoke about it. Trevor Modest spoke about it as well. But Adrian Francis is saying here that, and I'm seeing it too, that in 1978, St. David's Catholic Secondary School blew away St. Joseph Convent and Anglican High School to win the girls' division. I clearly remember the two young ladies, Karen Brazan and Helen Joseph. And I'm seeing here that both in 1978 and 1979, that the St. David's Catholic Secondary School back-to-back winners in the girls' division of Intercol. So definitely that the St. David's Catholic Secondary School began their championship titles way back than we really thought. It was back then in 1978 and 79 that the girls actually won.
I think you missed a name, you missed one important name there. You missed the Noel girl, what's her name again? She became Carnival Queen some years ago.
Oh, you mean with the name?
A Noel girl.
Oh, is a Noel girl who was also part of it?
Yeah. She became Carnival Queen in Grenada some years afterwards.
Oh, and she was, okay, right. Well, we'll get that.
She lives in England here now. Not far from here. Yeah. Somebody will be able to point that out.
Right. And what's the name he's saying about Colin Forrester competing fiercely for SAASS?
Yeah, that would have been in 1975, thereabouts, or 76, yeah. Colin Forrester, yeah. He would have been a senior at the time. So he would have been probably our best senior in those 2 years, 75 and 76, really. Because if you recall, from the thing you see, there's no Intercol in 1974 and 75. 74 had to do with the Principals Association now, decided at the end of 73 games that there will be no intercall in 74 because they were joining the protests over independence. The Committee of 22, they were part of that body that were protesting against independence under the current conditions at the time under Gary. So they were part of that organization, as I told the broad umbrella organization of the Committee of 22 in 1973-74. So they took that decision not to have intercall in 1973, 74, I mean. But then it went over into 1975. Independence came in February 7, 74. So there was no intercall 74. And then it went on to no intercall in 1975. Although we had sports in 1975 in Simon. So that's that we were in Simon for 4 years, 74 to 78. We went to telescope in 1978. So in those 4 years, we had sports in Simon in 75, 76, 77, 78, but not in 74. And then we went to telescope in 78, September 78, thereabouts. So there would have been no intercall in the first intercall after that would have been 76. And I said, well, that is where one girls, GBS would have won the boys in 76, I believe. 78 and then 79. SAASS should have won in 79. We lost by about a few points because Mr. Trevor Modest got upset in the javelin by a fellow villager from Paradise called Kenroy, what is his surname again? Kenroy Gordon. Kenroy Gordon beat him in the javelin. That's how we came second. So we should have won in 79, almost up to 70, 84. But he was beaten by a Kenroy Gordon. Many of him came third in the event. He may be able to better tell you what he.
Oops, I think we have just lost. Oh, he's back. Right. Yeah.
So Trevor
yeah, you were saying about Ken Gordon? Kenneth Gordon?
Kenroy Gordon of GBSS.
Oh, Kenroy Gordon, yeah.
He comes on the same village as Trevor beat him in a javelin. I guess he was determined to beat him, so he beat him in a javelin. And so that cost us 1979 intercall. It was the year of the revolution, in fact. So as you know, but I don't know if that had anything to do with it. By that time, we had lost Mr. Caldwell Taylor, who was one of our main support teachers for sports teams. And we had lost another couple other teachers. Another one called Francis Antoine. They both went to join the PRG government. So I don't know if those things, at least losing Mr. Taylor, Caldwell Taylor, who later became ambassador to Washington, if that had anything to do with us losing intercall that year. But I suppose losing them had effects on the team as such. We may have lost one or two, at least two would have probably gone to join the army. We did not lose Livingston or any of those other dominant athletes at the time. Livingston would have been a sub-junior in 79. Godfrey would have been a first-year sub-junior. Your friend Godfrey Augustine. So these are guys who were there at the time. But the big thing was Trevor lost his event, and that killed us, I believe, in intercall.
In intercall, okay.
That is 79.
Right, and the name that we were looking for there, thanks to Cheryl and Nigel, it's Mary Noel. Mary Noel is the name.
Mary Noel, yeah.
Right, Mary Noel is the name we were looking for. Right, and she be right. Okay. There is Podgy is saying, I remember my cousin Walter Simmons representing SAASS. Well, Podgy, you're probably related to Patrick Simmons as well. You know, he said Walter Simmons represented SAASS. And there is Okay. He's also saying Palm, my other cousin, Nigel Douglas. Okay, so some names coming up there. Let me just read something from Toro there. National selection historically has both subjective and objective factors associated with it. No structure for scouting talent nationwide, including in Carriacou and Petite Martinique. You could have lived in St. George's and talented as Pele or Maradona or Messi or Sobers or Richards, but if you didn't live in the right part of St. George's or didn't attend the right or had the right skin color, you couldn't get chosen to represent Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. That's what Toro Depredine is saying. And I guess as much he has some very historical facts to back it up. And I guess to an extent,
I would back him on that, but I wouldn't want to go totally against with what he's saying. But I know there have been guys in the past, much older than you, who have made the national teams. In cricket, for example, there was a Gordon guy who lived near to me. He has since passed away. He played for Grenada. And there was a guy from up St. Patrick's, I believe, who my father told me about, who played for Grenada also. But he was very good at fast bowling, but did not have the stamina. I suppose that was his shortcoming. So he could only bowl a few overs, like this guy from Barbados, what's his name? Was it Patterson Thompson, remember him? So he may have been like Patterson Thompson from Barbados. He was good for a few overs, but then could not bowl after that. So these guys made it for the cricket team and so on, but there would have been a few guys who got them because they were so very talented that they could not they couldn't choose not to pick them, so they got onto the team. But as I said before, there were other guys who were as good as people on the team, but as I said here, as Toro Depredine says, depending on where you came from, you could not get onto the national teams, be it cricket or football in those days. I suppose those would have been in the 60s and 70s, but in the 80s it became more apparent that we needed to pick anybody who was good enough to play for the national team. All I could tell you of one story in the 1980s, where Grenada was playing a cricket game at home, and about 7 or 8 guys were from the St. Andrews Parish, or from the countryside. And one selector asked the question, how many guys on country on the team? They were picked about 8 already. So one of the selectors said 7. So he said, that is enough. That's enough. He said, that's enough. That's enough. So that's big 3 other guys from St. George's to be on the national team. So Ken, who was the SAASS captain, should have been playing. Ken Campbell should have been playing. He did not make the team. So when we asked him why he's not, he said he was sick. So we told him to say he was sick. He wasn't sick. He should have been on the team. And so that was still very discriminating to a very good cricketer. He was a very good all-rounder. And I suppose that had an effect on him later on in his sporting life. I don't know much we recovered from that afterwards. He played football for Grenada as well as cricket, but it would have affected him. Then Nelson was on the team, and therefore I was on the team at that time. Probably Batai would have been on the team, and 1 or 2 others made the team, but he was the one left out. And he should have been on the team. We went to see him play. He was our school captain. We took out 2 buses down to see him play. He was not on the team. We knew that Dennis would have made the team. We knew that. He was that good. So, but Ken should have been on the team too. He was a school captain and all-rounder, but he did not get onto the national team.
Right, that's Ken Campbell, right? Yeah. So,
Ken Campbell.
Right, I remember Ken Campbell, and you mentioned the name Denison Thomas because, as we say, when you fast forward now, we don't really see that dominating sports. No. Yeah, because to some extent, I think
you look for the best now.
Yeah, you look for the best, especially I know for a fact in cricket, in some instances, the teams, the national teams, are actually dominated by players from the outer parishes. I know that for cricket, and it's because that the selectors look for the best, and they don't look for where you from or things like that. And then to an extent too, we have where students are schooling in one parish and residing in another. I know of a lot of students who attended, as you said, the GBSS and from St. Andrews, Budgrove, and other parts of St. Andrews. I went to school with some of those from outer parishes as well. So I think now it's more based on merit in terms of we don't look at which parish you're from or whatever it is like that. Once you're talented, you're selected. And I want to go back to some names, because the name Ken Campbell and Denison Thomas, that is another clan from the St. Andrews, from St. Andrews rather, and from SAASS, the Bataille and the Thomases and what have you, that dominated sports, and not just football. It was football. They played football. They played cricket, and to some extent, they also participated in track and field, all rounders, as you said. And that is a point we were making in the start of the program, that SAASS produced a number of all rounders in terms of sports. They played both football, cricket. Some played volleyball. I know of some who played volleyball, and also participating in track and field as well.
Yes, the Thomas family of Lifeless seem to be a very talented family. They all, if I start with them, Evelyn was passed on. Evelyn Quake Fredericks, he was very talented too. He played football for the national team and so on, St. Andrews, and I guess the national team, and cricket for the national team for sure. Not so much about football, cricket for the national, but he's a very good footballer too. And his brother, one after him, and then you have Bataille, and his son, who I believe was robbed from cricket to play football, which went quite sour within a few years. He should have been a very good cricketer, but the cricket lost him to football, which did not last very long. He went to Europe to play Eastern Europe at the time, and it did not. He may have done about 4 or 5 years there, but then that fell through, and so he was lost to Grenada at that time. But the whole family, most of them in fact, have done well in both football and in cricket, and represented the country in both sports. Denison, in fact, was the first Grenadian to play on a West Indies under 19 team that toured Australia. That would have been in the 1980s. Denison was, I don't want to boast, but he was in my Form 1 to Form 5, as well as is he the current West Indies cricket manager, Roy Lewis. I was Roy Lewis Form Master for 3 years, Form 1 to Form 3, before he was stolen from SAASS and brought to GBSS by 2 people whose name I will not mention. Not Mr. Ashby has no part to play in that. So 2 other people stole him from SAASS. He was supposed to go to live in St. George's, but he never stayed at the St. George's. He came up every evening on the bus and went home to Union to spend the night there. So Roll should not have left SAASS to go to St. George's. I don't know if he's the current manager that was in his team still. Is he the manager of the team still?
So the claim is that Roll was stolen from SAASS to attend the GBSS.
I'll tell you what they did. We won the United Shores Cricket Competition that year for the umpteenth time. We always win it. Only one school beat us before that. That was the GSS in Anglican. They were the junior secondary school at the time. And they had this guy who went on to become a policeman from the same Union village up there. He became a policeman. I don't remember his name right. I don't know it quite well, but name's listed. But They beat us in 1980. We won in 79, and they beat us in 90. But from 81 onwards, we won it until McDonald College deposed us from the championship. We played GBSS twice in St. George's in the finals in Tanty once and in Queen's Park on another occasion. We played St. John Christian Secondary once in SAASS grounds. And Mr. Greenish came up to see a guy from St. John Christian Secondary play. He became a policeman later on too. You might know him, you might don't remember his name. I think they call him Old Police. You might hear the name Old Police. He went to St. John Christian Secondary. He came to see him play, but we bowled him out for cheaply in SAASS ground. And we won the competition that year there. So we had dominated cricket in the secondary school's cricket for a very long time, as I said before, and until we were deposed by McDonald College. I don't know if it happened before Devon Smith went to school or since he went there. But I know this was the first school to actually beat us after we were beaten in 1980 by the GSS, the Grenada Junior Secondary School, as it was at the time. And we had a number of boys, as I said before. Roll was stolen from SAASS. You could put that, as old people say, put that in your pipe and smoke it. So he was never a relation at GBSS. He never came to the fore at GBSS. So he was a failure at GBSS as far as cricket was concerned. They never won anything with him. And so that was that at that school. He should have never been left. So when they took him, they gave SAASS, all they gave SAASS was a trophy. Roll got a bat, he got a cricket bag, and all he gets pads everything. He was the sole victor, as it turned out to be. As far as they were concerned, our captain at the time was a guy called Bevan Nack from Paraclete. He was the school captain. He got nothing. The team that performed, not Roll that performed, it was the team. Roll was in Form 3, my form. And then from there, he went to GBSS. We said nothing. He went there. We couldn't stop it. He went. He had to go to town to live with his aunt. That was a claim. His aunt lived in Union, as he did. He came up on the bus every afternoon. You can ask him. If you have his number, contact him. Where is he now? In Antigua, yeah? He lives up in Antigua?
Yeah, he's based in Antigua with the
in
West
Antigua,
Indies as the
okay.
The
So
manager.
he's still the manager of the team, is he?
Yeah, he's the manager of the West Indies.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Sorry for laughing, but I had to laugh because I think you the emphasis you placed on he was stolen from SAASS. You know?
I mean,
Yeah.
I will not put it any other way. I will not put it any other way.
All right. While you were speaking too, I was looking at so the 1980 to 1984, the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School dominating the boys' championship of Intercall, 80 to 84. Then from 1991 to GBSS I think came in 93 and 94.
They won 2 years in 19.
Yeah.
Won
So
89 and 90.
Right. To 2002, basically SAASS was dominating Intercall with the boys' championship. And that period too, to some extent, I know you were involved, whether you were still principal or not, and even before you left Grenada, you were always supporting the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School, SAASS. What you think were those years when SAASS dominated the Intercall championships? I mean, some years they were very close. It came down to the wire. It came down to the final event, as we saw. I think it was 2 years ago. The 4x4. Yeah. Most times
you say that, Michael, but before that, I think there was only 1 year where it came down to one event, and that would have been in 1984 or 83, probably 83, I believe. That was Livingston's last year. It could have been 84. There was an event, the 4x400 meters was the final event. Eugene ran the 400 before that, and he more or less collapsed. He came in third. The 400 was probably one of his better events, but he came in third in that event that year. And I remember one spectator came telling him, do not run the 4x4, not to run. So if he didn't run, our team would be weakened. That is how bad the town and country thing was at the time. Imagine a spectator coming to tell you, come down the field to tell you, do not run. And pounding his head, do not run. The man is tired, lying on the ground, tired, trying to recuperate, and they're going to tell him, do not run. Eugene could answer the question for you. So Eugene wanted his medicine. His medicine was some salt. He carried some salt with him all the time. So he took his medicine, he was back ready. But the person who won that race for us that year, had we lost it to GBSS, they would have beaten us. That was the closest year, apart from the year, about 20, what was it, 17 or so? Afterwards, when it was very close. Those were the 2 years when I can recall it was very close. Very, very close.
Yeah, I think
so had we lost that,
I think it was 2 years ago or so when it came down to the final. It came down to the final event. Yeah.
So that would have been so. But in the last year with Eugene and so on, we won the final event until an official decided that the event should be squashed after it was run. But we were in front still. We were still ahead of GBSS. I could not understand why that official said the race should be squashed. Sad to say, however, that she has passed on too. I will not call her name on it. She's no longer with us. But she passed on too. So she said at the time that event should squash the event, the 4x4. We had won it wrong quite easily. And I even showed I timed the first athlete in the event for SAASS, who was a cousin to Livingston Nelson, called Stevenson Nelson. He was Livingston's cousin. He ran the first leg for us. And he ran the other athletes into the ground. So from the time he ran his leg, I showed him Mr. Francis, Colonel Francis at the time. I showed him that it was 48 point something on a grass track, the last event of the day. He could not believe it. I showed him the clock. I stopped it at the event. And I said, look at the time, 48 something. He did not believe it. Probably up to this day, he did not believe it. And at the end of the event, to make matters worse, this woman is going to say, squash the event, squash the race, because people are coming on the track. People have been coming on the track off and on over the years. Nothing happened. But that event, squash the event. We would have won, if that squash event, we would have won the meet anyway, because we were leading GBS by a few points. But if they had beaten us there, they would have gotten the 10 points at the time, whatever it was. And we would have gotten a few points, probably 4 points less. And that would have given them victory by 2 or so points or 1 point, for that matter. But the judges upheld the event, and they could not do otherwise. But this one official, female official, said, squash the race, squash the event. It was fairly run. Nothing happened in the race. Whereas in the year following, 85, when the event was smashed, the whole competition was ended by violence, SAASS was blamed for everything that went on. Whereas, in fact, an investigation afterwards vindicated SAASS, found that we were not the cause, we were not to be blamed for what went on. And I can probably give an extended story version of what transpired in between the bottle pelting, which was done by many different schools at the time. SAASS pelted, yes, SAASS spectators threw bottles, plastic and otherwise, as did people from other schools. So it wasn't only SAASS did it, but then SAASS was vindicated at the end by the investigation that was carried out. Yet for all, sometime later that same year in 85, the Minister of Education and Sport lambasted our boys at a private function probably for football, and said these words, sport should bring out the best in us and not the beast in us. And none of our athletes were present at this throwing off any missiles, whatever you want to call them. They were with me on the field. I was on the field with them. They were protesting in 85 at the fact that one of our athletes was slapped in his face by an official, track official, slapped in his face by this official because he was querying the fact that they were disqualifying the 4x100 meters for senior boys. That's all he was querying, and the official slapped him across his face. The young athlete, he came to me in tears, babbling at the mouth in tears at the gate, telling me that he was slapped in his face. He was going to run the 4x4. The 4x4 team was different. So they stayed on the field protesting. And then Mr. Hudson McPhail came and told us to come and get the boys to run or to get them to leave the field. Otherwise, they were going to get the police to take them off the field. And Harold Paisady was with us at the time, myself and Mr. McPhail. He said, he saw what was happening. So I said to Mr. McPhail, if you get the police onto the field to take these guys off the field, the athletes off the field, the track, they sat on the track, so nothing could happen. They were protesting. They had a legal right to protest. They had a right to protest what happened before the disqualification, which was not right. And in fact, at the end of that race too, West became second in the 4x100 meters senior boys. Some officials at the finish line put us for third. It was a clear second place. PPC came second, I said. I suppose they mixed up the colors. Both schools were blue and close to navy. So I'm supposed to give them the benefit of the doubt that they made a mistake there. But we were clearly second there. But the thing was the slapping of the athlete on the field and the protest for disqualification in the 4x100 meters for senior boys. And now Mr. McPhail is telling me that we should get the boys off the field. I would agree with that, yes. Or they will get the policemen off, or they run the race. And then I said to him, if you get the police to take the boys off the field, do you want these people there turn around? And we were in the middle of the field on what was then the cricket pitch. And I mentioned also, Mr. McPhail, do you want these people to come down onto the field? And no sooner as I said that, they didn't hear me. They could not hear me. They broke the fences and they came down onto the field. And then the throwing of missiles began after that. All from both high school, GBSS and SAASS. They threw missiles at each other. It intensified afterwards. I had to run for missiles afterwards. I went to where our spectators were to probably try to get them to move away. And missiles were thrown at me too. And for a minister to blame SAASS at it alone was beyond anything that would have been disrespectful, to say the least.
So, well, I thought you wanted to skip some of the controversial. So I saw also in 1987 when the Boca Secondary School won the girls' championship and no boys. Was that also controversial, yeah?
It was controversial, yes, because for the fact that I can go back a bit, but 87, a few boys from that school who had won events at the intercall were found to be over the age. They contested the events in the wrong age category. So they ran as sub-juniors when they should have been juniors, and ran as juniors when they should have been seniors. So the committee decided that rather than it would be simple just to move, and I suppose that is where documentation is at fault. Had they documented who came third and fourth and fifth and so on, they would have had those results to go back to move people up a place or two, disqualify the athletes, and move everybody else up a place or two. And so things would have been ironed out. Who knows, GBSS could have won. But as it turned out in 1988, when we went back to intercall in 88, the officials were saying SAASS won. The announcers were saying SAASS are the winners of 87 or SAASS. When it was, they thought so, because if a school is disqualified, the next thing to happen is that SAASS should come up to second place to be the winners, from second to be the winners. So we should have been, probably, as I said before, GBSS could have been crowned winners if, as I said before, proper documentation had been taking place. So I suppose now, these days, we do it properly. So we have more information to fall back to. so that if we find people are competing in the wrong age category, we can make the corrections about even a year afterwards as they do at the Olympics, even 10 years afterwards as they do at the Olympics with the blood testing, with the dope testing and so on. This could have been done in 1988, 87, 88. Could have been done, but they decided to just throw the whole event, nobody win. So what is the point that people are going to compete then? If you're not going to have a winner, when you should have a winner. And I could go back to 86 and say something different, but I would leave 86 there. I would not touch 86. 86 would cause more controversy today than 87. It would cause that. In fact, I made friends with one or two athletes at GBSS in 86, or later than 86. One even said that when people like Stevenson Nessa came to school and IFE, where they went to school in IFE to do A-levels, he used to think that these guys were beasts when he saw them at Intercol, but they were very serious guys. But they were normal guys as everybody else. And he made that connection. They were normal people, but they competed very fiercely for their school. They would be friends with you afterwards. Stevenson went to IFE. He lived in St. George's for a long time afterwards. He worked in St. George's. I don't know where he is now, but he made friends with and I made friends with that guy too. He was a prominent GBSS athlete in the senior division. His name's slips me right out. Maybe I'll find it if I go back to my information I have. Let me look back and see. You might remember his name. He will tell me. I might. If you could bring up some names, I might, from the mid-80s, I might remember his name. He was a top athlete at GBSS.
You mean in the 80s?
In mid-80s, around that time, 87, 86, 87, around there.
Well, I know that in the 80s there would have been there was Jeffrey Neptune, there was
Jeffrey Neptune could stop there.
Okay.
Myself and Jeffrey Neptune have become a bit close, I should say. So whenever I go to sports in town, even last year, in 2020, when I went to GBSS Sports, I met Jeffrey, and we talked very candidly about sports. And he told me that it's not about which school we want to see the best athletes perform. Not about, he's beyond that now, not about who wins in the call, but he wants to see the best people perform. We all want to see the best people perform, and we all want to see them move forward. I suppose he went to study. He went to university. He should have been one who should have gone on probably to America, to a college of education in the United States. But I don't know where I knew he did a degree, maybe at UWI, but he should have gone on to America to get a sports scholarship there and gone on to study in America. He would have gone further, probably as a deck athlete, because he was a top athlete and senior athlete in 1986. And they won in 86. But it could have been different in 86 if we didn't participate in 86 for obvious reasons. We were protesting on principle that we were vindicated for what happened in 85. People did not recognize the fact that even then we were not to be blamed, because we were still chastised by a minister of government at the time for being beasts. If I would use that word.
So SAASS had a boycott in 1986.
Yeah, we did not go to call it. And the same minister, I would tell you now, promised us security to go to St. George's and back. He promised us that he would give us military, because we had a military in Grenada, still the SSU, I suppose, RSS, whatever it is at the time. He promised us that to come down to Intercol, and promised us that to go back up. But we did not turn up on principle. We were going to win in 86, as we should have in 87, if the proper things were done, and in 88, as we actually did. So we did that on principle that Ashton Maxwell, who went to America to study later, after 88, he was our top athlete in 87 and 88. He ran with Leon DeCoto of St. John Christian Secondary in 87 and 88, I think. So they ran together in 1 or 2 years. Leon was a very good athlete too. He went to America. He started university over there together with Ashton Maxwell, but he came back. I don't know the reason why he returned to Grenada, but Ashton stayed on and his parents had to pay for most of his 4 years of scholarship, as it was at the time. So it was a struggle for him and the family, but he endured and he succeeded eventually. So I believe he has a degree in whatever it is he studied, and he's making himself good in America at the present. So these two artists competed at the same time in Grenada in the late 87, and so on. Dakota would have been before him as a sub-junior and junior in 86 and so on. And he would have probably as a junior could have met up in 87 and 88 as juniors and seniors in those 2 or 3 years together. Yeah, sure, you wouldn't may have heard about him if you don't know Leon Dakota. He was very good. He was a very good athlete too. I'd recognize anybody who I deemed to be a good athlete, whichever school they come from or came from. As I say, get jacket. I would do that. He was good.
Yeah, indeed. Leon Dakota of St. John's Christian Secondary School,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. But over the last 2 years, we have had a disruption in school sports, and albeit the intercall championships in particular, but not just intercall, not just the track and field, I should say. You from the outside, you're looking on from the outside. And I spoke to Mr. Ashby last month, who shared the view that in that context, you would have supported the teachers, as the chair of the, principal association. What's your view and what's your expectation for 2021 regarding sports and the school level in Grenada?
I would personally say that the schools need to continue having sports or in whatever form, have the school competitions. This is what will help the children grow. Education not only about the books, about academics only. In fact, students may learn probably more from competing within their own school in sporting activities. It's a great contributor to their growth. I mean, academics is one part of it. It's a very important part, but other things play a very good part in people's growth and development. We know that from the very early childhood years that children playing together learn from each other, and they learn to learn about how to win and how to lose. That's why you learn how to win and lose. You don't learn to win and lose in academics. Academics is just part of the whole development process, but you need to be doing other things that will help you to grow as a man and woman. So sports is one of those other avenues that will help in that development or in that growth. And I would encourage every school to have the inter-school competition, the form inter-house competitions, even if there's no national competitions as such. But the school should have the internal competitions. If I recall, in SAASS, I know that even before my time, we have always had inter-form in the house cricket competition. If I were to go back and get an old cricket scorebook from SAASS, it would go back to in the late 50s, for example. You see score cards there, where people who went to school there, names are in it. And when they taught there, like there's this one man, Mr. Wesley Japal. He's from Post Royal, that area, St. Andrews there. He went to school in SAASS. He played in SAASS as a student. He taught in SAASS on 2 different occasions. Taught and went to America to study, came back, and then left again for a reason that are not about the academics and teaching and so. But he had to return to America not for himself, because of his other family businesses. So it was the only way that things would work out for him and his family. He must return to America. So people like that, and even the same Enoch Andrew, and so on the same paper doll that I mentioned before, they were students at SAASS, and they would have been competing in inter-form, inter-house competitions for years. People like that. And these are things that people should keep going. You cannot wait or leave it up to the ministry, for example, to run your inter-secondary school athletics sports meeting, track and field meeting. That was born out of the schools, not out of the ministry. If I were to go back to 1974 again, when there was no intercall, in 1974, Prime Minister Gary did not intervene and said there must be intercall. That was not important to him. It was left up to the schools. He never intervened. The ministry ran every other sport but intercall. And the schools must run intercall. Intercall is the business of the schools. It is not the business of the Ministry of Education. It belongs to the schools, and the Principals Association owe it to the children and the teachers and their schools to run intercall, not the Ministry of Education, not the government. It does not belong to them. It does not belong to the government. I am not going to say otherwise. It was started by the schools. And if I were to go back further on intercall, as it was even in the years before SAASS and BBC, there was one boys' school in Grenada, the GBSS Grammar School. And the grammar schools in the Windward Islands competed in inter-secondary schools competition. So there was a competition between the grammar schools of the Windward Islands, and not between SAASS and BBC and GBSS. They were born out of in the 1940s, mid-1940s. So there could not have been a competition between them. So GBSS went to St. Vincent, or they went to St. Lucia, where they met the other secondary boys' school, and they competed there, and vice versa. In about 1973 or 2 thereabouts, there was a inter-secondary school competition in Grenada for the first time, as I remember, and the team was about 18 boys or so. Otherwise, they could have had a couple of boys on the team because they were not very all-round performers like Ray Butler or Barry Vincent or John English or Padam. You should know Padam, Oswald Sidney. He has a radio station in Grenada now, I hear. They did not make the team because there were many performers in one sport. There were many athletes or footballers, whereas the team composed mainly all-rounders, boys who played in cricket and football and computer track and field. So you had the Lane twins from BBC, Headache's older brother, Roy and Raymond.
They were the Lanes, yeah.
Roy and Raymond.
Roy and Raymond Lane, yeah.
And I know Smalley was on the team too. That represented Grenada, but it was most of the boys were from PBC and from GBSS, the 18 boys. None from SAASS. We had guys who were very good at athletics or football. I don't know if we had any good cricketers at the time. You have to make the team as simply as a cricketer, but most of the boys who made the team were from GBSS or Presentation Brothers. In 1972 or 73, I remember I visited St. Andrews and they were part of an island tour, and they stopped off at Baines Hall. SAASS prepared the refreshments, all the boys there from all the schools from the Windward Islands, and they had the refreshments at the school at Baines Hall in Grenville. All the 4 islands were present there. So Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Dominic, and St. Lucia. It was a school from St. Lucia. So it was a grammar school thing up to that time. So later in the 70s, now we hear about this inter-islands games thing again, which came to fruition. My good friend Cheryl commented, Cheryl Kelly's good friend and neighbor. How are you, Cheryl? Junior, yeah. Cheryl knows me only as Junior. As would everybody else around Salisbury Road. He was very good at football. Padam was very good at football. Yeah. In fact, I think he started at GBSS, and then he came up to SAASS. That's what I heard. I don't know true that. He could tell you. I heard he started at GBSS, but he came up to SAASS. I remember we played GBSS 1 year at football, and my good friend Richard Jakes, who was also my neighbor, was explaining to me the days before the game took place, SAASS GBSS, at the Victoria Park in Grenada, that even if the forwards do not score any goals, that most of the goals will come from the wingers. They had a very, very good team. We had a very, very good team. And so I thought that we put up a very good fight, but I know on certain terms, GBSS overwhelmed us. They beat us 5-0. It was our biggest loss to GBSS at any time at all, 5-0. At the Victoria Park, the park was filled with people, but we were no match for GBSS. They had one player from St. Andrews. It was a Belton guy from Griffin Lane, or Rivulet Lane, I think it was. A Belton guy from Rivulet Lane. His two brothers went to SAASS. He went to GBSS. He's the eldest of the three brothers. So they beat us soundly, 5-0. We had Eric Butler, we had Padam, we had Lamiel Tobias Toby, we had John English. We had a very good team. I think Lucky B might have been our goalkeeper. Somebody could enlighten us on that. Lucky B was some success. He was very good enough. He was very good enough to be a national goalkeeper at the time too. But they overwhelmed us. We could not beat them at all. So Richard was very correct. Richard Jakes was very correct. That if the goals didn't come from the forwards, it would come from the wingers, and so said, so done. Most of the goals came from the wingers, both left and right hand side. And we won no match for them that day. I would concede that to GBSS. That's one game. That's one they were better than us at the time. They were better than us at football at around that period, although we beat them many years before, according to my friend, Mr. I mentioned his name earlier on, the insurance minister from Saturday up there too. We did speak about him earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But apart from the exploits of the boys, I mean, SAASS also had its own in the girls, and more so in track and field. I not recall that SAASS had so many accomplished netballers, but they held their own in the girls. I think Nasha Belfont, is it Nasha Belfont? I think was Nasha Belfont from SAASS? No, Nasha was from the convent. Sorry, the Modest. We were speaking about the Modest. Yeah, but we were speaking about the Modest. Sorry, the name Modest, and the late Judy Modest, for example, was one. And then there are others who dominated the field events, especially in girls, championships. But I will say we don't speak that much of the girls. Every time we tend to concentrate a lot on the boys, but the girls held their own. Wouldn't you agree that?
I would agree with that, yes. So somehow I tend to go backwards now. I'm holding up a bit of paper to get some names here. I go backwards from Albie Andrew in track and field, in the field events. Maria Moore, who played under 23, she was in track and field too, and played under 23 netball for Grenada. And we have Trish Bartholomew in the late 90s, thereabouts, yeah, when I left for the final time, 2000, around that, 2000, 2001. That would be Trish Bartholomew among the girls. And then we would have had in the mid-80s, we would have had Daniela Abraham, Lois Isaac, and Christine Sincere in track and field at character games level. All of them were medalists at character games in more than 1 year. Each of them would have won medals at character games for Grenada.
The middle and long, they dominated the middle and long distance, right?
Yeah. So they would have won there. They would have won they won medals in those years at the character games. And if we were to go further back in the 1970s, in cricket, we had this Alexander girl, a cricketer, who made the West Indies team at 14 years. She got on the West Indies cricket team at age 14. Joan Alexander. She played for West Indies cricket in the mid-70s at cricket. And following her, we had Marcel Belma playing for Grenada, I believe. And presently, as you say, we have Affy Fletcher.
Right,
when I left Grenada, Affy Fletcher was probably just beginning to play cricket. She would have been in Form 2, let us say. She was better at football at the time. So she was just picking up on cricket.
And she's now a West Indies player.
Yeah, she's now a West Indies player. Yeah. So those three names I remember well. Affy presently, then Marcel, and before Marcel, Joan Alexander, who at probably 14, 15 years was playing for the West Indies women's cricket team. But she has since migrated to the United States. So that would have been about 74, 75 thereabouts. Yeah.
And while you look for more names, again, Mr. Julien, the point is being made that, and I think it's emphasized and being strengthened. We need to document these things. Rich history of the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School SAASS, and no doubt something that I believe that the alumni should feel proud of. And current students and prospective students should also be, being acquainted with the history of SAASS.
There's one gentleman in Grenada in St. Andrews. Mr. Simmons will be able to tell you about him. His name is Eric Donald. Sir Eric Donald. He has been associated with SAASS since about 1974, 75. He went to GBSS, but he has become a SAASS boy because he taught at SAASS for a number of years. And his heart is in SAASS, even though he went to school at GBSS. He has probably he would have a number of SAASS programs as well as intercall programs. He will be one source of information in that sense of the word. Probably he will have more. He would have been one of the people who would have. He is one of the people, in fact, who would have a lot of information in terms of documented information in terms of programs from different schools and so on. Because there were years when we would go to different school sports, or we would send a PE teacher to school sports that was coming up. Anybody that we figure would have been a threat to us, I think because we sent somebody to spy. We only use that word to get information and at the track and field meet. Although you only get information at track meet because the field events went before, so you only actually saw them run, as they would see us run too. So we'd always probably go to GBSS Sports in St. George, PBC sometimes.
So you actually admitted that schools were engaged in the quote unquote spying in those days in terms of
everybody.
Yeah, everyone.
Everybody did it. Everybody went to each other's sports. If you wanted to excel, you had to go to see what was happening. You cannot depend on a program or hearsay. You had to see what was going on. But we have some areas that people learned about much later, probably too late for most of them, that we did it probably out inadvertently. We started doing it, not spying or anything like that, which helped our athletes and so on, and which over the years, we have seen other schools copying, or probably not even doing it the right way, but which is still persistent doing, and which I hope they still are going to continue doing at the school. But we did it. It came to us as out of thin air, really. Let us do this year, and it persisted. It has persisted over the years, and so we have maintained that. And I hope they will not allow it to die. So it is something. It is not anything extraordinary. Just a simple things that we have been doing over the years, and which other schools have copied. But I guess I don't know why they have copied it, but they have copied us, and so on, and so it goes. Yeah.
how much in touch are you with the school, that's SAASS now, and
Mm.
nowadays I should say the current administration of
I, s-
the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School?
I try not to get too directly involved. I might probably speak to one or two people there at the school, one or two others outside who I think might have influence in the school and so on. But I don't think I should be getting too involved in what is happening at the school in terms of trying to be an influence. So I may share an idea now and again. I look at what is happening here in education here. Whereas the government here is at fault for a number of things. There are good things that you learn from reading and so on, or from reading journals and so on, academic journals, or like newspaper like Time Education Supplement, Times Education and so on, that you can share with people back in Grenada or with your school or with any person for that matter, which could help to boost not just SAASS, boost education in Grenada. So, and these coming from very um, educated sources, and so not people just saying something, not anecdotal information, but people have investigated who have written journals and so on, or writing journals, academic journals, or whatever it is, and psychology journals and so on. And so they know what they're talking about because they have done the research, and they're not just talking about things by the by, but they have done the research and they have been able to carry out different work in different settings and be able to write an article and present it to an academic journal as the case might be. And so in such cases, you're not talking from the top of your head, but you read and you um, might hear comments even on top radio stations or media outlets, and you can pass on what you hear to somebody at home. I do that from time to time, but not too much because it may sound as though you're interfering, and I really don't want to interfere. That is generally though a general comment rather than. Yep.
Okay, well, fair enough. But I get the impression that your your heart and soul, they still lie in the bosom of the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School,
Mhm.
SAASS, and whatever you can do to assist, you will
Right.
continue
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
assist SAASS because, as you
Mhm.
said earlier, it has done quite a lot, not just um, for the parish, but
Mhm.
for Grenada itself
Yeah.
and the
Right.
psyche, the sports. It provided a lot for those. And we
Uh,
have, I don't know if you have names that you wish to call. I know you have been sparring with some names, but those who may be, and to some extent may have forgotten them, but for some reason they would have contributed quite a lot to the life of the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School. I don't know if you have that.
um, I hope I have not forgotten. I have not forgotten anyone. I will not remember everybody now. I may have to come a second time to do that. Or a third time even. I could talk for the year if you want me to. Anyhow, I remember the only thing that didn't happen to me is that I wasn't born in SAS. From the age of 3 or 4 years, I've been going to SAS really. So SAS has been my life. I went to pre-primary school near the SAS, near SAS in Grenville, in the Nutmeg Pool building in Grenville there. The pre-primary school run by two sisters, the Phillips sisters. So I would have been going to SAS. I would go at end of school day to wait for my dad at SAS. So I would meet children there and teachers. So I know quite a lot of people dating back from 1964, 63, 64, and so on. I would go there to meet people there, meet students there, and so on. So they would know me, coming there as Mr. Julian's son, and then wait for him to take us home. And so that happened. So when I went to Methodist school afterwards as my primary school. So I spent 7 years there, and then from there I came back to SAASS. So my life has been with SAASS, most of it really, until I left in 2002. Physical, I should say that. I went to school, I taught there. I was a principal there for 6.5 years, up until 1996. From the 15th of May 1996 to July 31st, 2002. And then I've been in connection with the school ever since. I'm not giving up on SAASS, so my heart and soul is there, and so on. So if I go back to call some names from the 1960s, when SAASS wanted to call for the first time, girls that is, I can mention, for example, Edith Wilson as a girl, um, um, Patricia Pickney Douglas, and these are two people I remember from that period. In 1971, I would mention Euphemia Gordon from SAASS. All of her brothers went to school in SAASS. She was the only girl. They all came to school in SAASS. She had a bigger brother called Anthony Gordon. They all came to school in SAASS, and they are from SAASS. And you had also Jean Bartholomew, now Jean Bowen, Mr. Gregory Bowen's wife. She was on the winning team of 71. She may have been the captain of the girls' winning team. And then you had Pauline Andrew. Pauline Alexander. Sorry, not Pauline Andrew. Pauline Alexander, now Finley. Delma Peters, who was since passed on 2 years ago. They were athletes around the same period in SAASS and so on, in the 70s, these two girls. And then you had others following them. You had, I can remember a couple more names of the girls. It was Shirley Sears, a very good all-round athlete, track and field athlete, very good in it. At athletics, mainly, and netball too. Even though we did not, she was a very good netballer. That is Shirley Sears.
There was also I think you showed me a picture. The mother of Jumani Williams.
Yeah. Pat Joseph Williams. Her husband was
Pat. Right.
Husband was known to everybody as Social. That was his nickname as such. Social was his nickname. He was brother to Sir Lawrence Joseph. Whether adopted or natural brother, they were brothers. They lived together in the same house in Salisbury Road for a number of years until he went to the States. I think he married Pat up there. And Giovanni was their son, or is their son. But he has since passed on. He became a medical doctor, but he has since passed on probably between 5 and 10 years ago, or less than that. Incidentally, Pat's nephew or cousin, in fact, plays rugby for England. He's a Joseph, so that's our relative who plays professional rugby for England itself, and should be on the team that is known as the team that they pick every few years that goes overseas to play as a player in the United Kingdom as a team that play against other national teams. He's on that team. You should make that team too. I forgot his first, but he's a Joseph. He is Pat's cousin, close cousin. His grandfather died about 2 years ago, drowned 2 years ago or so in Lassages Beach down there. He was in his mid-80s thereabouts. His name is Jonathan Joseph. If you look him up, you'll see Jonathan Joseph. That's his first name, Jonathan Joseph. Name just come to me. He's a very good rugby player. Plays rugby union, not league. The league is a professional one. But the union players also are paid now, but they were not paid many years ago. He was they earn quite a lot of money. Not as much as football do, I should say.
Well, I know, as you said, you'll have to have a special program just to call out names because quite an exhaustive list. And well, we just have 1 minute basically to wrap up. But I think your boys also, that SAASS boys also attended the sixth form of the GBS, well, former, it will be former SAASS students, and were part of the hostel, the hostel setup back then. Was that the case?
I don't think so, unless I went afterwards, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know
mean,
if it was
no, I'm speaking about after and moving to sixth form at the time, leaving SAASS and then going to the sixth form.
They would go to IFE, National College. So they go to National College and so on, boys and girls. So you'd have people like, there are a number of, like we'd have Stafford John, Dominic Mitchell, who incidentally beat Jericho was at high jump. Jericho was since passed on. He beat him at high jump at Intercol 1. And Jericho was so upset that he did not compete again for the rest of the day, that Dominic Mitchell would beat him at Intercol in a high jump. Dominic is a very peculiar guy. If Dominic has a high jump this afternoon, he has to remove his glasses in the morning. So his eyes could get properly adjusted for the afternoon event. He could not see without his. Anybody who knows him will tell you that. He's a very eccentric guy. But he was very talented, very brilliant, very academic, and very sports-minded also. He was in school together with Walter Simmons and Patrick Simmons. He was a very talented guy in sports and very good academically. In 2009, I came out to Grenada on vacation, but I spent my vacation in hospital, as you may have heard. I suffered a heart attack, and I had suffered 2 strokes also. But while there, I spent only 3 days in St. George's General Hospital. I requested to go there. And I met some of my past students there. They were all doctors. Kenroy Hines, he was also in athletics. And there was a girl, and there were 2 or 3 other young medical doctors who went to school in SAASS at the time. Dr. Francis, he was one also. The 2 other names slip me now, but I have not forgotten them. I can see their faces in front of me, and they will know that the name just passed me. They're slipping at the moment, but I haven't forgotten them. I met 1 or 2 of them at Intercol 2018 in St. George. In fact, the female doctor, she came to look for me in the stands, or when I met her downstairs. She was working in the medical room downstairs, so I met her down there.
I think they're trying to help you, Petra Francis.
Petra Francis, yes. How could I forget Petra? Petra Francis, yes. She was a medical female doctor. She was one of those that I met who came to look for me at the hospital in 2009, as well as those other guys, Dr. Hines and Dr. Francis. And there's another one whose name slips me right now, but I haven't forgotten. They know that I don't forget. I haven't forgotten. And
Joyce Julian, you say Dr. Andy Bonner.
Andy Bonner,
yeah.
Some of them remember more than others, you see, because some of them were sometimes naughty, so they had to come to see me at the office. Well, even if they're doctors now, they would remember me, because they would have to visit me at my office from time to time. So there were students, and they were sometimes naughty. They were sometimes naughty as everybody else. Everybody is not a saint. Nobody's a saint. So they would visit me, and I would probably.
Oh, okay. So Petra Francis is actually on, and she said, "Hi, Mr. Julian. It was an honor."
Yeah. It was an honor to be your headmaster too, Petra. Very, very nice girl. Very nice young lady.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Julian, and no doubt it's our first program for 2021, and I look forward to having you sometime again. And promise me, this time we will be reading from the documents as Mr. Simmons is encouraged people.
I'm sorry, I haven't said much. I have not said much, really.
Well, yeah, I want you to say quite a bit because I know we have quite a lot to go through, and
Yes.
this time we'll have more photographs and other things to show because I know you sent me some photographs and I just didn't get a chance to deal with them, but it's interesting and we need to share the history of those schools and because as we say while we deal with sports. Back then, while there were club sports, a lot had to do with the schools, and the schools played a very important role in the nurturing of young men and women over the years.
If I may interject here briefly,
Please.
I know that in SAASS we had 3 houses at the time. There was no 4 houses as we have today. There was Lane House, named after Father Lane, who was one of the principals. Pigot House, which is named after the Bishop Pigot, who is also named as a house in Anglican High School. But let me go further and tell you that, and tell the nation that, and anybody listen that the Anglican High School is a sister school of SAASS and not GBSS. GBSS is a government school. SAASS and Anglican High School are the sister schools, not GBSS. They're just close by. They may be neighboring schools, but GBSS has nothing to do with the Anglican High School. It's a SAASS and Anglican High School. In 1978, when SAASS went to St. Vincent to be part of the Anglican 150 years in the Windward Islands or whatever it was celebrated then, the schools that went were not SAASS and GBSS and high school, but it was SAASS and Anglican High School. Our boys and girls, 15 boys and 15 girls, made friends. I remember Marva. Marva lives on Melville Street. Whenever I go to Grenada, I don't want to look for Marva, but we always seem to meet up in St. George's, and we always have a good chat. Last year when I came, I met another young lady who was the youngest girl on the high school's team, and she came to me. I've met her a couple of times before she came to tell me last year that, remember, I was the youngest girl on the high school team, Mr. Julien. That's what she said, and we spoke. And at the same GBSS sports, a young woman who was there, who sat alongside me, I went to attend GBSS sports last year. Because I thought that I came to the realization that intercall was going to be touch and go. So I went to GBSS sports, not because I wanted to, because of intercall, but I wanted to see the sports. I went to their sports. I miss convent and so it's St. George's anyway. But I went to GBSS sports, and this young woman sitting next to me said that yes, SAASS and high school are sister schools. And she went to high school. There was a couple of girls there who were saying no, GBSS when the sports is in the college and so on. So we had a little chat back and forth. But then she said she told them that SAASS and SAASS and high school are sister schools, not SAASS, not GBSS and Anglican High School. And she went to Anglican High School. She acknowledged that. So some people feel that there's 2 schools on the hill, 2 schools on the hill. What is that about? They are not sister schools. I will tell them again. SAASS and Anglican High School, and probably Bishop's College in Carriacou. We are the sister schools. We are all Anglican schools. All of Mr. Creswell Julien Sr. said at one time that the Anglicans believe that they only have one secondary school, which is Anglican High School. Some of them in St. George's believe that. He said so. And more than one occasion. That is controversial to say today. But some people believe that SAASS started off not as St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary, but as St. Andrew's Secondary School. It became St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School when the SAASS people later and Judge turned it over to the Anglicans. He and his associates, Mr. Lennox Phillip, my godfather, who's also the godfather to Ambrose Phillip, turned it over to the church, and so it became St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School. They did not start up a SAASS, start up St. Andrews Secondary School to give boys and girls in the parish a chance at a secondary education that they would not get in St. George's unless they went to St. George's. Somerset, we have one pilot, at least one. He's Captain Bain, who went to school at SAASS. Lauren Ramdan, went to school at SAASS, and so on. They were some of the early students at SAASS. Captain Bain flew with Liat and so on over the years. I think eventually he had his own line eventually. And so I don't know if any of the Wadali pilots went to SAASS, but they may have, I'm not sure. You would have to research it. They were two brothers, I think. They live in Laddie. Incidentally, the Antoine boys, they start off Antoine and Dr. Antoine. What's his name, his first name? I think he has a movement in Grenada now. Patrick Antoine.
Dr. Patrick Antoine. Yeah.
He and his brother, I know them well. Not well enough, but we know each other. All three of them, the three big ones. And the second one went to PBC. We used to talk at Intercol and school sports and so on. We have good relations, good rapport, etc. Well, they all come from St. Andrews, by the way. As are the Lanes, they grew up in St. Andrews and they went down to town. And then I don't know, they came up from town and went back down. As is Beryl and Clarkson, our brothers. You should know Beryl and Clarkson, I guess. And our brothers, they start off in St. Andrews at some point. I think Jeffrey Neptune has connections with Munich too. That's something to find, I believe so. Jeffrey Neptune has connections with Munich and so on. So St. Andrews has not served only St. Andrews, it has served Grenada in many different fields, many different fields. Not SAASS only.
I want to thank you for that bit of information, and particularly the segment on the Anglican High School, SAASS, and even to an extent Bishop's College. But again, I'm saying it. The more you speak, the more I'm convinced that you need to write, you need to document, you need to have something.
I've been writing.
Right.
I'm writing many different stories in the lockdown. And incidentally, I heard one woman on radio or TV recently saying that she has been doing the same thing too, writing over the whole period of the lockdown since the coronavirus took over. She has been writing, she's an author herself, but she has been writing particularly about this period, this past year. I've been doing that too. And my sister Mona has a lot for me. I've written to her and many other people. So they're documenting my information. So I hope when I want it, they're able to give it to me. And I blame her in 2008 when our parents died, when our dad died, for not writing about it. I told them they should write about Daddy, interview him and write about his past and his past life. But they did not do that, and he passed, and so we lost quite a lot. As a family, we lost quite a lot, and the nation lost quite a lot. He had quite a lot to say, too. Yeah. All we could talk about now is what he passed on to us. And I don't know very much about him, I should say. There are other people out there who know about him than I do. I only know him for 50 something, for about 52 years or less, because I could not have comprehended much about him in my first 5 or 6 years. We were in the same house, but I could not comprehend much of him during that time. I guess he has spoken to other people during that time more than he has spoken to me as a parent. So I do not know very much about him in that context, and so on. Mm-hmm. Because he started teaching at 14 years. He started teaching at 14 years. He started teaching people who are older than him when he started teaching. And incidentally, he had two stints at GBSS. He went to GBSS and went back to his primary school to teach. And then he went back to GBSS. I believe he's from GBSS. He came up to St. Andrews, where he lived, and then became the headmaster in 1952. So he had two stints at GBSS and came to SAASS in 1952. where he became the principal from then until 1986, when he retired for the final time. So there's a lot
Well,
about him.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. And we have quite a lot to talk about. As I said, it's just the start of the year, and
Yeah.
we will be from time to time speaking quite a bit.
Some privately, but not all.
Yeah, but
Together.
but we do have
Yeah.
to, and I think that will help quite a lot in terms of, like, for example, we have the Naka Joseph, who did something for St. John's,
Oh,
and as I said, SAASS has been the beacon of sports
yeah.
for the parish of St. Andrew, and there's no doubt that it also has rich history, rich and historical value to the people of Grenada as well. And I believe that something, and Toro, well, I know Toro will be talking about that as well, because there is moves to start something on a national level, but it will take quite a lot of research, quite a lot of resources to do something of a national on a national level. And I think those steps in terms of what we saw in St. John, and probably what you and others can do with SAASS and St. Andrews, will help a lot in terms of realizing that goal, because even though we're small, I think our history is, as we'll say, enormous, not
It's
just
very, very,
political,
very
but sport
rich.
as well. Yeah.
There's one man I mentioned Richard Jakes earlier on, but his father, I didn't know documented anything from him, but his father would have died with a wealth of knowledge too and information. He knew Grenville inside out, because he was what you would call he would have been one of the people helping around the town of Grenville during the days when he had the district board. Because he worked together with my father, who was the chairman of the St. Andrews District Board. So he was a paid official in the St. Andrews District Board. So he's the father of Richard Jakes, and the wife of Mr. McGuire's, George McGuire's wife. He's a mother, he's a father of this lady. Now he would have died with a huge amount of information if they did not take with any documentation from him. He could tell you about Queenie Grenville inside out. Mr. Leonard Jakes, yeah. But he died about maybe 10 years ago. More than that, probably, yeah.
All right. Well, as I said, yeah, thanks very much for that. And a bit of information for me too, in terms of I'm starting about the Anglican high school issue, and I'm certain it will be also news to quite a number of people who would have attended Anglican high school and were not even aware of that. But as Toro said, a lot of rivalry is.
They won't like to hear
that.
Point blank.
Toro says it's school children Picong. He considered that to be school children. A lot of rivalry is school children Picong. Proximity is mostly responsible for Anglican High School and GBSS jointly celebrated victories together over the schools on the hill at that time, St. Joseph Convent, St. George, and the Presentation Brothers College. So I think he's correct.
One bit more. You may have heard about a year when GBSS or PBC beat the rest school, and one of them dragged a coffin through the streets of St. George's for beating the other school. They dragged a coffin through St. George's. That was in the 70s. And we have been PBC doing it, or GBSS, but they actually did it. One school dragged a coffin through St. George's because they beat the other school. They had it prepared, I believe. So they got an opportunity to drag it.
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't put that past GBSS because
he might be able to tell you.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past GBSS because there was always the Picong of Rock of Ages between the GBSS and the PBC.
PBC.
Yeah. So I want to thank you, Mr. Julien, and I know it's late in your part of South London. Thank you very much for being our company today. I enjoyed it. I am certain the folks who were with us enjoyed it as well. Thanks for the information. We hope to reconnect sometime again as we plan to do another and continue the conversation. As I said, just as how Mr. Victor Ashby was on our program and he decided to be on the program in the near future to continue the conversation. This time he wants to talk about the boys and how the effect of the young men on sports, and I am certain that you can come with another discussion, something we can discuss again. Folks, we will continue with this time with the current principal on Thursday. Mr. Carl Andel, the current principal of the McDonald College, will join us as we get ready for this new school year, although they haven't started as yet. And sports, we look at McDonald College, St. Patrick in particular, on Thursday at 6:30 in the evening, 7:30 local time, that's in Grenada. Mr. Carl Andel will join us. But I want to thank you, Mr. Julien, from your
end. I want to say thanks for having me. And it was a pleasure for being on the program today. And I hope that I've been able to not just edify, but inform other people of things from the past that they may not know about, may or may not have known about. Thank you.
Okay, then. Thank you very much, Mr. Julien. Thank you very much.
And pleasant evening to you.
Okay, then. All right, then. So that's Mr. Julien there. He was speaking to us live from South London, and he says somewhere near Kensington, over
Kennington over. Not Kensington, not Kensington, Kennington. People always in Barbados. People always make that mistake.
Kennington in South London. He is there.
That's the home of Surrey cricket team. That's the home of Surrey cricket team.
Right, the home of Surrey cricket team. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So
once again, folks, it has been a pleasure for you being with us on our first program for 2021. And we're looking forward to other future programs on Thursday. As I said, Mr. Carl Andel, the principal of the McDonald College, will join us 6:30 Eastern Time, 7:30 Eastern Caribbean Time. And we'll be speaking about the McDonald College sports at the school, in the parish as well, and looking forward to the 2021 sports season. He has been on our program before, and we're looking forward to that program. And I can tell you, very interesting lineup in the coming weeks. As when we took the recess, we were basically preparing for 2021. So we do have a very interesting lineup coming up for 2021. I want to thank you. I want to thank those who joined us today, the alumni of the St. Andrew's Anglican Secondary School, as well as those who have been with the program from the start. I want to thank Toro and others, and Clev and others, for being part and always assisting and providing little tidbits of information. Don't forget, join us on Thursday, 6:30 Eastern, Eastern Time, 7:30 Eastern Caribbean Time. And then next Saturday, God's willing, we have another program from 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Until then, I want to thank you all for being part of the Saturday Sports Special, and look forward to you on Thursday for the Talk Sports program. Thank you very much. And for those of you who joined us for the first time, Happy New Year, and have a very wonderful weekend.